Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Scale with Joy show. I'm here with Micheal Huey. We had met on Clubhouse and became fast friends because we realized we had so much in common. And I'm going to let him tell you about the incredible entrepreneurial journey that he has had. And one thing that we have in common is that we're both believers. And if you've been part of this podcast you've been listening, you know that I come from a place of strong faith in God, and many of my guests do too. And so if this is something that you resonate with, or you're just more curious about that journey, I'd really encourage you to listen to this conversation, because it's sure to shed some light on not only just what happens when you have strong faith and things are going well, but when you have strong faith and things aren't going as well. And we'll be talking about both. So welcome, Micheal, and thank you for being here.
Hey, Laura, thanks for it's not a coincidence. Laura and I don't believe in coincidences, but today Laura's interview with me is going live on Apple, iTunes, and all of the platforms. So, and I was just telling her before we got on that my wife was listening to it this morning and she was like, "This is awesome." So, tell Laura when you talk to her today that it was really awesome. So, it's a joy to be here. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
that's such a nice compliment. You know that the podcasts are good when your spouse is into it, right? When you
Oh
know
yeah.
that you're doing a great job when somebody who already knows you and can ask you anything tunes in. So I really do appreciate that. And
Amen.
I know that you have had some incredible experiences as an entrepreneur, but just to give the listeners context, can you just share a little bit about who you help and the type of work that you do?
Yeah, it's funny, and I know we're probably going to dive into this a little bit because I read some of the questions that we were going to ask. But I had since I've been in the online space, I had a very successful brick and mortar business, right? And and it was in the fitness industry. I am a lot older than I look and feel. I feel 30, and I will be 53 this year. And I really, when I say that, I don't say it lightly. I really mean it. Like literally, I wake up every day. I have more energy than I deserve. At my age, most of my friends are on medications and they're overweight. And for me, my journey has been um, after having this very successful personal training brick and mortar business, to selling that, to creating um, I would say a little bit of burnout after a while,
Mhm.
right?
Oh,
And getting rid of that business was like a burden being lifted, right? And then I created residual income, which I have today, that's exploding. And then I decided to coach online, and I started that in 2018. I rebranded my company name because everybody told me my old company name was kind of lame. And we came up with, and it was Total Health Experience. I didn't think it was lame, but other people did. So I was like, well, let's just start fresh, right? And it's funny, Laura, my license plate it has the number 8, and 8 is new beginnings, right? And that's what
yeah.
this is. He-Fluence, he meaning God. And if you could ever see our logo, there's a little arrow pointing up with a shield on it, with the shield of faith, right? He being God influences me to influence men and women to walk in purpose in their health, in their relationships, in their businesses. Obviously, being a nutritionist and a health coach, and recently being nominated for a PhD, I obviously the health piece is a big thing, right? And I'm a big John Maxwell fan. John has always taught me that if you're not learning and growing, you're dying, right? He said, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, get out of that room as quick as you can, right? And I've taken that motto, even like where Laura and I met on Clubhouse. Like I had a room last night, and when I got finished, I felt myself a little emotional, like a
Mm.
little bit, like she's like, "Are you crying?" And I was like, "No, not yet," but I feel like I could, right?
Not far. Yeah.
Yeah, not far from it. And I was like, we had like 200, between 150 and 200 people. And usually if you get over 100 people in your room, you're doing really well, right? There's
Right.
some rooms that have, 1,000. I'm in one right now in the mornings, called the Breakfast of Champions, with my friend Glenn Lundy. And he gets about 1,500 to 2,000 people, and it starts like 6 o'clock in the morning, right?
Wow.
And my DMs just began to blow up. But He-Fluence breathed so that I could fulfill what I felt that a calling on my life was, to go to the next level, to help more people, to expand my reach, to get out of my comfort zone, and really use the gifts and talents that God had given me. And I felt I had when COVID hit, I had a dream in January of 2020 where God took me into a room, Laura, and um, oh man, and sorry, um, he met me in this dream, and I was standing in a room, like if you know, looking in this room, and on my left was one door, and then in front of me was all of these doors. They were open, and it looked like they went for miles and miles, right? And everything else was dark around them, and you could see a light that was shining from the miles away through these doors. And I was like, what am I doing here, right? And then I looked behind me, and there was all these different doors that went for the same distance, like for eternity, I thought, that were, some of them were broken, some of them were crashed, some of them were closed, some of them were open.
Mm.
And I closed my eyes, and I heard the door on my left open. And God walked in, Jesus walked in, and I said, Lord, why are we here? And he said, this is your life. He said, this was your previous life, and this is your life that you're going to have now. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I said, why are these doors broken? And some, open and close. He said, that was your life. Some of the doors you walked through, and some of the doors I tried to close and you kept open, and some of the doors crashed because you weren't obedient. And I was like, huh, he's right. I said,
Yeah.
you're right. And I said that to him. I said, you're right. And so I said, well, what are these doors? And he literally took his arm and put it underneath my arm. And he said, this next phase of your life, we're going to do together.
Yes.
He
Oh my
said,
gosh.
and your impact is going to be, your latter days of your life are going to be greater than the former days of your life. The people that I'm going to put you in front of, and that they're going to be in front of you, are going to be lifelong relationships that you're able to sow into them and encourage them, and you're going to be able to help so many people. And it was humbling. And he said, I just want you to close your eyes and imagine that. He said, bend down. Can you see the light through these doors in front of you? And I was like, yeah. He said, now stand back up. He said, but just close your eyes and see yourself with me walking through those doors. And in an instant, I heard and the door on the left was closed. And I woke up from my dream, and I was like, no, like I really want to go back into this dream. But then I realized that that's where it was. And that started this whole journey. As I was telling Lauren, we were off stage, I had somebody that really cost us about $500,000. We lost all my wife's retirement. I learned from it because I didn't have a contract with this guy. I just trust him because he was a friend of a friend. And literally through God's grace and mercy, we have been able to turn things around. We had to do some consolidation of some things, and now I can start to even see that light more and more every day, because I feel like our impact. I was telling Laura before we got on, our impact has just exploded. Like,
Awesome.
I would say Clubhouse has been a blessing, not just from the people that I've met, but like, um, I just have been, and I know we're going to talk about this, but I've been overwhelmed a little bit by uh, the expansion and the influence that you can have when you really step in to becoming that person that God's called you to be, that your identity is not in your past or things that you lost or anything like that. And I think I've started to figure that out. I've started to understand. I started I'll finish with this. I started reading a book that I read in my 20s, Laura, and it was funny. I I went to see a counselor in my 20s because I was like, my life is just. I mean, I was in love with God, but my life was out of control. And I remember going into this counselor's office, and he left a crack in the door. And I was like, that's weird. Like, he went back over and left a crack in the door, and he's like, okay. And we've been friends now for almost 25 years, right? Over 25 years. He said, if you're here to hear what you want to hear, then go close the door behind you, pay my secretary, and make another appointment. I was like, what? And he's like, but if you're here to hear what God's going to say today, and what I'm going to share with you that will move you in and towards your purpose, then go close the door and sit down. I was like, ran over,
Yeah,
closed
of
the
course,
door,
right?
and sat down. And he told me at the end of that, he said, I want you to read this book. And Tom had a very prophetic gift. I don't think he knew that at the time, but he said to me, he said, here's a book I want you to read. It's called Boundaries.
Oh yeah, by
And,
Dr. Cloud.
yeah, by Dr. Townsend and Cloud. Yeah. And
Oh yes, yes.
yeah. And so I'm rereading that right now.
Oh,
And
that's so interesting you
it,
say that. I'm actually rereading the same book right now.
it's so cool. And here we are 25 years later. I believe that God, when he says he knows the plans that he has for us to prosper us, to give us a hope in a future, it's those little things that he uses
Yes.
to bring us back into balance. So yeah, so that's where I'm at now. I'm in a really good season in my life. I feel like I've became I got ordained into the ministry last year also. And so I consider myself a marketplace, even though I'm a minister, I consider myself a marketplace minister. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in life right now.
That's so cool. And there's really some things that you said that I'd love to dig a little bit more into. And a little bit off what I thought I'd be asking you about, which is actually great because I think the best conversations happen organically. So, the first aspect I would like to dig into is health. So you say that you absolutely look younger than you are if you're watching the video. If you're not, I'll just let you, anybody who's listening, know that. And that you feel much younger than you are. And I would say for myself, as somebody who has three children, one of which is still nursing, you're running a business, it can feel so physically exhausting to be an entrepreneur. It can feel like even if you're eating the right things and you're drinking all the water, you still can wake up in the morning feeling like you got run over by a truck. What is that about? Is that about our adrenals? Like what's going on in our bodies as entrepreneurs that you feel like there isn't enough multivitamins in the world that can get you
Yeah.
to the level of energy that you feel like you need?
Well, I was told, just before I answer that, I was told that sometimes Laura can be very rogue in her interviews. I that the actual things, it actually says that in the thing that your administrative assistant sent me. It says, "Oh, just be prepared that Laura can kind of change things around and be rogue." And I like that. And the reason I say that, Laura, and then I'll answer your question, is
Yeah.
my friend Tim Story and I were talking, and for those who don't know Tim, he's just one of the most amazing humans that walks the face of the earth. Like, he's a pastor, he's a life coach, an entrepreneur. We're going to be doing some events coming up this year and next year. And one of the things that Tim told me is, he said, why don't you just let God lead?
Yeah.
Like, just pray and let God lead. And I challenged him on our story when I interviewed him to never say 50-50 again. And he was like, because I asked him, I said, how do you balance being a pastor and being an entrepreneur? And he said 50-50. And I said, no, isn't it really 100-100? And he's like, I'm never saying 50-50 again the rest of my life for anything. It's always going to be 100-100. And to answer your question, um, I have been really able to make a radical difference in the lives of almost everybody that we work with, entrepreneurs. I just had a client that I didn't even know this, Laura, that Arkansas was one of the largest producers of rice in the United States. Like, when you think of rice, you're not thinking of Arkansas, right?
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
No. And one of my clients had been in the farming industry for 35 years. And she says, Michael, I'm tired of paying people money that don't help me move the needle and waking up. Go figure, Laura asked this question. Waking up with energy, sleeping better, um, losing weight. She had her thyroid taken out. And she said, I'm going to trust you for the next 90 days. Right. And she was in the middle of her season, and she went through this, and we got done, and I did an evaluation with her, and and she said, Michael, I have my life back. I have my life back. And I said, well, what was the difference? And she said, you made me look at 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months down the road, instead of trying to push something temporary just to, for me to say, oh, I feel great today. And then, like you said, Laura, like tomorrow I feel crappy and I'm not sleeping good. And she actually laughed and she said, could I feel like I have my thyroid back? And I said, well, You did have the surgery. No, you don't, but you can feel like that. And I think a lot of it goes with stress. I think the stress of, like you said, nursing a young child,
Yeah.
more kids, a husband, a wife, right? And it's funny that we're both reading the Boundaries book, because it's, you have to know when to say no and when to say yes, right? And I think sometimes, like, we realized, like, just say no on Clubhouse, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't get yourself overwhelmed to where it's, some people stay on there 6 and 8 and 10 and 12 hours, and I'm like, no, right? Like, I would say the one thing that truly believe this with all my heart is that entrepreneurs, when it comes to their health, it's not as high for the majority of entrepreneurs as it is for others, right? And even in the morning on the Breakfast Club, like, you just hear people like, "Oh, I want to learn from Steve because he's taking his finances and his health and everything else that he does serious, and he wakes up at the same time, and he goes to sleep at a certain time, and he does these certain things." And I think it's one word. It's intentionality. I think that that is the word that allows people to and balance, right? And the intentionality goes with you being able to say yes and you being able to say no. And I think for me, I'm super intentional. Like, my schedule is very regimented. Um, and I think that I learned, I'll just say this last thing. I learned this from Caleb Maddox. He's 19 years old. He wrote 9 books before the age of 15. He's a 7-figure earner at 18 years old, right? And he said that his health is the one of the most, his faith and his health is two of the most important things, because he said, if I don't have those, what do I really have? If I don't have my faith and my health, um, I have a bump. I'll finish this. I have a sticker right here on this mirror, or on this light that I have over here, and it says, "If you don't take care of your body, where will you live?"
Yes.
And I thought about how profound is that. That I think that most entrepreneurs just don't have they it's in their mind and they think about it a lot, but there's no intentional aspect. And I'll tell you what changed it for me is I learned about DNA testing. And I learned about how everything in our DNA tells us everything that's going on inside our bodies. And, like,
Really?
yeah. And I found several different tests, and I used a couple different of them. I was in another test with several of the top 100 people in my industry, including Ben Greenfield and Dave Asprey and all these guys. I'm still trying to get Naveen to publish these results, because I was in the top 3 out of 100 of these so-called healthy entrepreneurs, and I was ahead of Dave and Ben, who are two people that I really have a lot of respect for. And they did all this different testing. We did gut testing, we did saliva testing, we did all this
Hmm.
stuff just to see kind of what our biological age was and what was going inside our gut and what our brain function was like. And and I realized that when we did these DNA tests, and I did a couple different ones with a couple different organizations to kind of see what was the most consistent with people, right? So we did hundreds and hundreds of them. And I found one that I believe is consistent. And literally, we can look at it and tell everything that's going on in the human body. And I find out that a lot of entrepreneurs are lacking sleep, they're lacking hydration,
Yes.
they're stressed to the max, and there's just no peace. And I think that peace comes when you
Mm.
eliminate a lot of the distractions in your life and you kind of take back your life. And I think that really goes back to the word intentionality that I was talking about earlier.
So good. And it's really, this conversation is so useful to anybody who's listening, whether you're faith-based or not, because it is addressing the issue of boundaries, intentionality, health, and why entrepreneurs are so depleted. And I think for me personally, I've been an entrepreneur long enough that I can manage the stress. The stress is something that I can eliminate or I can anticipate. and know what to do because of something coming down the pike that I know is could be potentially stressful if not managed correctly. But it's more the depletion. And I think we are living, particularly women, and I know you specialize really in health for men, but I see it with my husband too, 100%, that there is so much required of both of us physically in this season where our kids are home. They have a ton of questions. Our clients and our work has lots of questions. Everybody has things that they need from us. We're trying to fuel our bodies physically. I think as women, we take a lot of time recovering from childbirth. I think it can take up to a year um, to really heal and recover, particularly when we're nursing, which requires so much more from us nutritionally, right? And that at the end of the day, you feel like somebody just took the battery and ran it dry. And then when you wake up in the morning, it's not like it's went back to 100. And
Oh,
I'm wondering what happens with entrepreneurs. I know you're saying that there is stress, but is there other things happening in our body that we need to be aware of nutritionally and from a vitamin standpoint?
yeah. So there's several things that I did in the last couple of years. Like I thought I said this earlier. I thought I had figured it out.
Yeah.
Just when you think you figured it out, you do some tests and you realize you hadn't figured it out, right? And so for me, when I did some telomeres testing and I did a gut testing thing, and I just found out that my body was not. I mean, I felt great, but on the inside, I was dying. Just like this, I was talking about this test that all these people did, and you see some of the healthiest people at the gym and they can't run 100 yards or they can't run a mile or whatever, and they're entrepreneurs and they're dying. And I think what I've found from this DNA testing is that people don't really think about, they only think about the external,
Yeah.
right? Like, how do I look in my Instagram picture, or how do I look with my wife, or how do I look with my husband, or do I have a six pack, or is my butt showing, whatever, right?
Right.
It's the thing that usually drove me crazy about Instagram was that I think that people's, it's just constantly Vogue pictures, and I protect my eyes. I just turn that stuff off. I don't
Yeah.
follow people like that, no matter if they're following me or not. It's not like that for me. I think our body is overwhelmed with there's a you use the word stress, but there's another word that's a scientific word that I think is very important, Laura, is called oxidative stress. And oxidative
Mhm.
stress is at the very center of every disease. um, it's like if I take this stand that my lights are on here and I set it outside, what's going to happen to it in another week or two? It's going to rust, right?
Yeah.
And our breathing in and our stress and breastfeeding and all this stuff causes oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is now in the medical field, when it comes to health and medicine, is the most researched topic when it relates to sickness and disease and fatigue and all of this stuff, right? And then another piece of it is mitochondrial function, right? Like, how is our mitochondria? Like, I'm building a cold bath downstairs, right? That's about to come, and it's going to be a freezer that I'm going to turn into a bath. It's going to be 48 degrees that I'm going to lay in every morning. And I have an infrared sauna that's in
Mhm.
my other room in here that I use, right? And there's a lot of things that go on. Like, for instance, what I've been finding, two big things that come back, and I'll just use women for an example because I have about 15 tests right here in front of me. For women, hormonal issues, um, you know, pH balance, like the type of water that they drink. If you don't drink alkaline water, your body's in an unpH state, and then all of these other things can go on. It's your, you know, we hear the big crave with intermittent fasting, and stuff. For some people, it's good, but if you do it too long term, it can mess with women's hormones. So
Wow.
everybody's body is different, but I believe it starts in these couple areas. It starts with your oxidative stress levels. It starts with your pH levels, starts with your mitochondrial function level, right? Because that's whole. And then this is the biggest piece, is our gut. I believe that if your gut is unfunctioning and you wouldn't sleep, I would say 75% of the work I do is with people who have a bad gut. They just they either have bloating or gas or cortisol, or they just have leaky gut, or they have SIBO, or any of these things, right? And they reflect your brain. So this is what I'll say about this. the most important thing that you can do is to lower your stress levels, obviously, but lower your oxidative stress levels. There's pathways in your bodies. We're in the 21st century now. One of the things that I think the reason why I scored better in a lot of these tests than Dave did is because he takes like 100 and some supplements, and I take like enough that you can put in a cup because they're activating my body rather than supplementing my body. I believe that's a 21st century way of thinking now, right? Tapping into systems inside the biohacking term and nutrigenomics. But here's the last thing I'll say, Laura, is that our gut has to be functioning. Our gut is our second brain. If our
Mhm.
gut is not functioning well, we will wake up in the morning with gas. We'll wake up with fogginess. I can tell you this: I don't wake up like that anymore. Once in a blue moon, I will, but it's probably because the night before I watched TV too late and I just got out of my norm, or I was on my iPad too long working. But those are things that I control, right? But
Mhm.
if I consistently have my body functioning at the cellular level and have my gut functioning the way it's supposed to, I can live. I changed the way I thought. I used to always say I wanted to live to be 100, Laura. And now I think I can live to be 120 and feel like I'm 75.
It's amazing. Okay, you are a wealth of knowledge, and this is incredible information. And I am so inspired. I'm writing down the words alkaline, oxidation, gut function. I think most of where my head is as a mom, right? And we take so many antibiotics. Our children are in antibiotics. Having given childbirth over 40, they induced me and broke my water, and I was on antibiotics for like a day. And because they didn't want me going to my due date because of various risks, being 42. So it's really interesting to think about how that impacts us. And what I hear you saying is that all of this just multiplies the depletion that we experience as entrepreneurs, even if we're not quote unquote feeling stressed. The wear and tear on our bodies that entrepreneurship can create multiplies things that may already just be an issue, like
100%.
being pH balance, or like just not breathing, right? Oxidation, um, like issues in your microbiome or your gut function because of everyday um, components that come in, but that entrepreneurship can add to that taxing, that level of
100%.
taxation.
And it adds to, I'll just say this real quick. It adds for me, like, I think even had I figured this out years ago, that a lot of things that I've went through, like I'm even teaching my wife this now, like, you know, um, being able to plant aside a lot of that stress that comes upon us from entrepreneurship affects our health, right? No matter whether you want to look at it, it does, right? But once we figure out the balance of that and being intentional about, like, let it go, right? Somebody said this in a group and it when I in our room last night, just let it go. Like, I think, it's my wife is a big Frozen fan, and obviously Laura has kids, so she knows about Frozen, and they just
Yeah.
let it go,
Yeah.
right? And it's amazing when it may seem cliche-ish to people, but to me, how a little simple movie, a Disney movie, allowed me to just say, hey, it is what it is. I can't control it. God's in control, and I'm just going to let it go.
Yep.
Simple.
Yep. So good. All right. This is a great conversation. And we're at the end, we're getting close to the end of our time here. And I know that people are going to have lots and lots of questions about where they can learn more about all of this incredible information that you know about. But just before we wrap up, in one word, what is the key to living your best life from your perspective?
Well, when you sent me this, I was like, oh man, one word. Like, and then Laura went rogue on me. We went down a different
Yeah.
path, right? And I'm gonna I thought about this, and I'm gonna say, and I hope that this resonates with you, and I'll make this just 30 seconds, okay?
Yeah.
I believe the word is obedience.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I'm going to say, I just read this article, and I'm just going to tell you 30 seconds about it because obedience is huge. And this is why obedience, I found these 5 reasons why obedience will draw us closer to God and closer to our best life, right? And one was, when you're obedient, you can walk with God. Like in my dream, I'm obedient. I'm not going to have those doors the way they were. They're going to be walking with God. And there was three examples that when I was looking at it, there was Enoch and Noah and Adam, and
Yeah.
how their life radically changed when they did that. And then the second reason was, when you're obedient, you can obey God's voice. You can hear God's voice. When you follow God's voice, we help others see his wisdom, and we truly can help the Holy Spirit draw them closer to him. And then number three was, um, when you're obedient, you will be blessed. You'll you'll have the favor of God. And then number four was, when you're obedient, you're choosing God's best, right? You're literally choosing, um, you're usually choosing God's plan and purpose for your life. And the last one was, when you're obedient, you're just trusting God to be God. He says that he is the rewarder of those that diligently seek him. And he says, we can't claim to love God without obeying him and his word.
Yeah.
Like, let's just commit to that word, obedience. So that was my word. I was so excited to share it with you.
I
So I'm very
love
glad
that
you asked.
word. Have you ever read The Principle of the Path by Andy Stanley?
I have not, but I'm going to write it down right
Do you
now.
know Andy Stanley?
I do. I do.
I love Andy Stanley. And I will tell you, anybody who is not a believer in my life, I will still send them Andy Stanley sermons, not to try to change their belief, but because he's so good at framing things up in a way that's understandable, whether you're a Christian or not. And he
100%.
does it in a way that it makes anybody feel totally welcome, to listen to him and to get something out of it. But the principle of the path, for me, I read that a few years ago, and everything made sense for me in light of obedience in that moment, because it broke down the principles of the path in a way that is so aligned with scripture but also common sense, that it's so useful in understanding whether or not you are walking in obedience in a very simple and clear way. And so if anybody is interested in that, I highly recommend that book.
That's so good you said that. I'll just add one more thing on top of when I was reading this that I took away from it. And it was from Kenneth Copeland, right?
Yeah.
And at the very end, he says, let's obey him immediately. Just think about this. Immediately and wholeheartedly, he said, so that we can walk with him closely and listen to this, and enjoy the benefits of our obedience. Think about that. Obey him immediately and wholeheartedly so we can walk closely with him, right? Trusting and knowing and enjoying the benefits of our obedience.
Yeah.
So good. I was so
That's
encouraged today
good.
by that. It
It's
was
a
just
perfect thing to wrap up on. Perfect, perfect. So, if people want to connect with you, they want to learn more about some of the amazing health insight that you provided today, where's the best way for them to connect with you?
I would say I've kind of transitioned to Instagram just because
Mhm.
it's under Micheal David Huey at Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn under Micheal David Huey, or my favorite platform, Facebook. No, I'm just kidding. Laura and I were talking about that as we got on.
That's another
Yeah, and
podcast episode.
yeah. And so, but yeah, those are the easiest place under Micheal David Huey, He-Fluence. You'll find a lot of stuff on He-Fluence. We're launching the middle of March our He-Fluence YouTube channel, which you'll see stuff on women's hormones. You'll see stuff on
Mhm.
men's testosterone, which I think are two of the biggest things. You'll see a lot of the stuff that Laura and I talked about oxidative stress and mitochondrial function. So yeah, those are the best place.
So good. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your incredible insight with our audience. It was great having you, and I look forward to seeing you on Clubhouse.
Amen. Thank you.